Today, we're going to unwrap Feastables. You know, the chocolate brand from Mr. Beast that says it's way more than just another candy bar. We're going to follow the whole journey, all the way from the farm to the factory, to see if they've actually managed to create a better chocolate bar.
So why even start a new chocolate company? Well, it kicked off with a pretty simple observation. If you look at the major chocolate brands, most of them are over 100 years old. The whole argument here is that they're kind of stuck in their ways, from how they source their ingredients to how they make the final product. This quote really nails their mission. It's time to shake up an old-school industry.
That is a huge question, right? And to really get what Feastables is trying to do, we have to go all the way back to the very beginning to see where chocolate actually comes from.
And it all starts right here, on these cacao farms. Now, this isn't just some pretty picture. This is the most important step in the entire process. And it's where Feastables says they're making their first big difference.
What you're seeing here is just how hands-on this whole process is. I mean, these cacao pods take about 6 months to ripen, and then workers have to harvest them by hand using these special curved blades. They literally crack them open with a machete and scoop out the beans. And get this, none of this can be automated. It's all manual labor. Those beans then get fermented, and that's where that classic chocolate flavor really starts to develop.
But here's the thing. This manual process is part of a much bigger and honestly a pretty troubling system. Before we get to how the chocolate is made, it's really important to understand the tough realities of the industry they're trying to fix.
Think about this for a second. An incredible 70% of all the cacao in the world is grown in West Africa. But even though these farmers are the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar global industry, the huge majority of them are living in poverty.
And that brings us to this absolutely staggering number. For most of these farmers, their daily income is less than $1. A single dollar. That reality, as you can imagine, causes a ripple effect with some pretty devastating consequences.
And this slide right here shows the direct result of that poverty. An estimated 1.5 million children are caught up in illegal child labor in the cacao industry. It's a huge systemic problem, and it's all driven by the economics of the industry.
So this is where Feastables really tries to make it stand. Their whole approach is built on a few key ideas. First, they only source fair trade certified cacao. They also pay farmers what's called a living income reference price, and they will only work with farms that have systems in place to monitor for child labor. The philosophy is actually pretty simple. When you pay farmers fairly, their kids can go to school, and the farmers can actually focus on what they do best, growing higher quality cacao.
Okay, so after the beans are harvested, fermented, and then sun-dried for about a week, those high-quality beans finally arrive at the factory. So let's jump to the next stage and see how these beans become a chocolate bar.
All right, so inside the factory, things get pretty industrial. First, the beans are roasted to really unlock that deep chocolate flavor we all know and love. Then they're shelled, which leaves behind these little things called cacao nibs. These nibs get ground into a thick paste, which is called cacao liquor. That liquor is then separated into its core parts, cacao butter, cake, and powder, which can then be put back together in super precise amounts to create the perfect final flavor. But before they even decide on those ratios, Feastables does something pretty modern. Instead of a bunch of executives in a boardroom guessing what people want, they just ask. They send out surveys directly to their fans.
And after surveying over 250,000 people, one flavor just shot to the top of the list. It was the most requested by far. And so the next product on the lineup was going to be the Feastables Caramel Bar.
Now, when it came to actually making the caramel, the main focus was on not taking any shortcuts. The recipe is basically a small batch, kettle-cooked caramel using simple ingredients you'd find in your own kitchen. Real butter, sweetened condensed milk, heavy cream, brown sugar. The whole goal is to steer clear of the artificial flavors and colors you see in so much mass-produced candy.
So how did it turn out? Well, the very last step before they do a big rollout is blind taste testing with thousands of people. And this quote from one of those testers really captures what they were going for, making something so good it even wins over people who aren't usually big chocolate fans.
Okay, so we've got a winning recipe for the chocolate and for the caramel. Now it's time for the final stage of production, putting it all together.
This number really gives you a sense of the scale we're talking about. A single 500-pound batch of that kettle-cooked caramel makes over 12,000 chocolate bars. It's pretty cool. On the assembly line, the chocolate and the caramel actually flow into the molds at the exact same time to create that finished bar. But even when you're making thousands of these, there's still a human touch. Before any bar gets wrapped up, a quality team member on the floor checks them by hand.
They're literally measuring the weight and size to make sure every single bar is up to standard.
So all of this leads to that final moment in the grocery store aisle, right? The choice is basically laid out like this. You've got the status quo, those brands that have been around forever with their complicated supply chains, and then you have a new choice, one that claims it tastes better, is better for farmers, and ultimately is better for you.
And that really just leaves us with this final thought. Beyond the taste, beyond the brand name, we're now being asked to think about the story behind our food. So when you're standing in that aisle making a choice, what are you really choosing to support with your money?